Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Dr. Bazun. I am the Dean for the College of Arts and Letters. And on behalf of Austin Peay State University and the College of Arts and Letters, we welcome you to today's event, sponsored by the Institute for Public Humanities. And this is exactly the type of event that we were hoping for, I think, when the Institute was established. We're glad that you're here. I'm going to keep my comments very short, but I just want to say that the three people are some of the best people that I've met since we arrived in Clarksville a couple of years ago. Very glad to have them featured here today. So I'm going to pass this along to Linda Crenshaw, who is the host for the event. But again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Buzz, and thank you all for being here. Thanks to the museum for hosting us, and Arts and Heritage Council for promoting, and for Beach Haven Downtown for hosting our reception afterwards, which I hope you'll all be able to attend. I have a hard job. I have to introduce these people quickly, and they have, as you know, very distinguished biographies, so I'm just going to hit the high point. I suspect that most of you are lucky, like me, to consider these three people friends. And I mean that, and I don't say it often enough, but I love you guys. I just love you. I'm going to introduce all three, and then we'll hear from each of them one by one. Charlsie Halliburton has contributed to Clarksville Humanities in countless ways for many years. She taught ballet from 1983 to 2016, fostering the interest of a multitude of girls in not only ballet, but the arts in general. She served as a leader in many boards, foundations, organizations which form the backbone of Clarksville's cultural heritage, including serving as the chair of the Mid-Cumberland Arts League and APSU Circle of Excellence. Her many contributions were recognized when she was the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Arts and Heritage Council. She's here today to talk about the work of her brother Tom Malone, in memory of whom she and her husband John endowed a scholarship at Austin Peay. Peg Harvill is a signature member of Artists for Conservation, the leading collective of artists painting in support of the environment based in Vancouver, Canada. She was awarded their highest award, the Simon Combs Award, in 2022. She's a member of the TWASI, the Wildlife Arts Society International, based in the UK, and is a three-time recipient of their international award and also an award-winning member of the Heart of America's Artists Association. She's a co-founder of Artists and Biologists Unite for Nature and has overseen projects on every continent with artists worldwide. Her works are in museum and private collections in Germany, Spain, Singapore, Brazil, and the U.S. She is a Clarksville native, having returned to her hometown in 2022. And how lucky are we? She's here to talk about the art of her mother, Peg Harvill. And finally, Tom Mabry graduated from Austin Peay in 1977 with a BS in English and a minor in history, and that's really all you need to know about Lawson. Right? You don't have to talk to him for 5 minutes, and you're like, oh, you're an English major with a minor in history, right? He's currently involved in land acquisition, development, and construction in the Clarksville, Montgomery County real estate market. He also has deep connections in the banking industry. He was an organizer in both the Clarksville Montgomery Public Library Foundation and the Clarksville Academy Foundation, of which he is the current president. Additionally, he served or is serving in a variety of leadership positions in real estate, banking, education, and other community organizations. He is here today to talk about who knows what. Most prominently, some members, selected members of his extraordinary family. So each of these panelists is going to talk between 10 and 15 minutes, and somebody said to me today, wait a minute, you and Lawson Mabry are going to be on a panel that's going to last an hour? So I'll try to keep time. Lawson has agreed that if he goes on too long, when it gets to be 5, y'all just get up and leave and go to the downtown Beach Haven, okay? Does that sound okay? Well, without further ado, we'll start with Charlsie.
What an honor. My brother, Tom Malone, and I were lucky to have been raised by wonderful parents who taught us by their example their great respect of nature. Our home was in a woodland setting where we all enjoyed the beauty of the outdoors. Kentucky Lake was often our family's weekend destination, where we took in the abundant gifts of Mother Nature. As a child, Tom gained his love of plants, animals, waterways, and aquatic life while exploring the woods and fishing in the lake. Appreciating nature and protecting the environment became his lifetime theme as a gifted artist. Tom had the great fortune at Clarksville High School of studying art, taught by artists Dan Hanley and Tom Rice. They saw the promise that Tom possessed and encouraged him to pursue his interesting artistic style and creativity. While a student at Austin Peay's new Trayer Art Building from 1970 to 75, one of Tom's professors was noted artist Olin Bryant, who recognized that Tom had unique talents in studio arts. Over time, Olin Bryant became Tom's trusted friend and mentor. Painting, drawing, and sculpting were their common passions. Olin Bryant said of Tom, and I quote, "He was genuinely interested in exploring ideas and possibilities, yet there was a stylistic consistency going back to his student days. He had a very specific idea of what he was about." Olin Bryant, with Tom's assistance, designed the model for the Sentinel, better known as the Green Man, a massive 12-foot-tall bronze statue weighing 2,100 pounds. It was unveiled and dedicated in May of 1979 in the heart of the Austin Peay campus. Austin Peay's Trayer Gallery was the site of the Tom Malone artworks, an exhibition held in February of 1980. Expertly handcrafted tables made of mahogany, rosewood, walnut, cherry, poplar, and various cedars were a large part of the exhibit, which also included various sculptures and paintings. One particular oil and acrylic painting was entitled Journey and was purchased by the city of Nashville. Tom's painting was exhibited at the Parthenon for their Century III bicentennial celebration held in April of 1980. His work remains in the Parthenon's permanent holdings, which document Nashville's culture and history, featuring noted Tennessee artists. Tom moved to Colorado for a few years and found new inspiration for more works on nature. He sculpted, painted, and drew flowers, meadows, fields, streams, forests, fish, and animals of all types to add to his growing collection of works. Upon his return to Clarksville, Tom began his employment at Austin Peay and bought a home in historic Dog Hill, where he continued his passion outside of work. His home was his art studio for painting and drawing. His music room, including 16 handmade guitars and 2 handmade harps and a piano, and his woodworking shop for sculpting figures and crafting furniture. Tom salvaged wood from downed trees, deserted barns, demolition sites, and sometimes shared wood with his friend Olin Bryant. Tom, Olin, and Tom Rice often had exhibits and sales of their sculpted works. Tom's fish, carved of wood and stone, Olin's faces, and Tom Rice's birds were sought after and considered art treasures. The Leaf Chronicle hosted Artistry of Tom Malone, an exhibition of Tom's works in 1995. 43 works of art were exhibited, including paintings and drawings, using oils, acrylics, pastels, and charcoal, in a style that Tom described as impressionistic, and handsome sculptures made of walnut, a variety of cedars, hackberry, and poplar. On April 10, 1998, Tom died suddenly of a brain aneurysm at the age of 45. He left behind a large legacy of artworks that are still found in state buildings, businesses, and homes in Tennessee and throughout the country. Essays, poems, newspaper articles, and letters to the editor were written about Tom following his untimely death. He was remembered not only for his remarkable talents, but also for being an humble friend who enjoyed a simple life, enriched by his creativity and respect of nature. Our parents, Anne and Charles Malone, and Johnny and I, established the APSU Tom Malone Endowed Memorial Art Scholarship. Recognizing the impact of Tom's vast talents, the scholarship annually enabled aspiring studio art students to follow his path because of the life he lived and the legacy he left. In June of 1999, Reflections, Memorial Art Exhibition of Tom Malone Works, was held at Austin Peay's Trayon Gallery. Olin Bryant, curator, and Betty Holte, director of galleries, initiated the show, which exhibited 59 pieces of art displaying Tom's versatile artistic talents. Olin Bryant wrote the following about Tom, his former student and departed friend, and I quote, "All of his work is characterized by his own artistic integrity. In whatever medium he used, his skill as a consummate artist is apparent. Charm and elegance are found in the work of this gifted young man who gave to the cultural history of the community." Unquote. The Little Man was a signature drawing for Reflections and was believed to be one of 3 self-portraits done in 1998 prior to his death. In November of 2000, the Customs House Museum featured Open Windows, a CD designed and recorded by Tom from 1971 to 1981, and displayed his lap harps and guitars in the museum's lobby. His good friend Chuck Embry produced the CD and wrote this tribute about his creative friend of many talents, and I quote, "Once upon a time, a magician came to the village. To the wonder and amazement of some people, he would make bits of string, wood, stone, bone, tape, canvas, paint, and many other objects come to life before their eyes. Some of the bits performed music that would cause visions to appear. Some of them turned into fish and birds and looked ready to dash away into the wild. The magician caused these things to happen because they amused him, but mostly because it's the nature of the magic to be. The magician could not help but to make it the magic. Like all magicians, he moved on. The people that could see and hear the magic were sad for the part of them that went away. The people that couldn't see or hear convinced themselves that they had. But that is the nature of magic." Chuck Emery, April of 2000. Patterns of Progress, the enormous 18-foot by 6-foot sculptural assembly created by Tom Malone, was unveiled in the entrance foyer of the Clarksville Montgomery County Public Library on June 29, 2006. Tom's magnificent sculpture was placed adjacent to Tom Rice's stunning Indiana limestone sculptures of birds. Charlie Faust, president of the Clarksville Foundry, commissioned Tom to create the masterpiece in 1985. It was made from an array of vintage gears, wheels, and pulleys used to build molds for molten iron for machine parts. Faust called Tom's work, and I quote, "an artistic celebration of the industrial heritage of Clarksville Foundry, Clarksville's oldest active business, founded in 1854. Faust donated the impressive piece to the library for community enjoyment. Professor Emeritus Olin Bryant and Frank Lott offered remarks about Tom's contributions to arts and culture in our community at the unveiling and opening ceremony. Sadly, Tom's sculpture was moved from the front lobby of the library because of renovation and is now found in the rear of the library in the Red Room. On April 10, 2011, Tom Malone Remembered, a memorial exhibition of the Malone family collection, opened with 45 works of art. Greg Schlanger, Art Department Chair, was curator of the exhibition that filled the upstairs and downstairs of the Trayon Building's main lobby. The signature work, Girl in Motion, 1975, was featured on the program cover of the opening ceremony. Following the reception, well-known artist Dan Hanley, Tom's former instructor, wrote this about Tom, and I quote, "Seeing his work is always inspiring, motivating. He seemed driven simply to respond to his own keen and sensitive observations of the world around him, compelled by his great heart and his desire to share his impressions with us. He is among the most authentic and the most genuine artists I've had the privilege of knowing. Thanks for sharing his legacy with those of us who loved him." Dan Hanley. Customs House Museum's Crouch Gallery was the setting of the 2013 exhibition, Tom Malone, Art from Influence. Featuring Tom's work through a chronological series of 22 portraits of women, curator Terry Jordan remarked, and I quote, "As he works through the years, Tom figures become stronger and more confident in the application of color. The intense styling of the eyes marks the signature style for Malone. His faces look back at the viewer, unapologetic and familiar. Whether simple line drawings or vivid impressionistic pastels, each face Malone drew leaves the onlooker curious to learn her secrets, and that is talent. During the 1998 time frame prior to his death, his portraits of women change, becoming darker, and influence, perhaps, of his personal health. His final self-portraits are full of expression and calm sadness." And that was Terry Jordan. In May of 2018, Faces, a Tom Malone retrospective, was held at the new APSU Art and Design Building. Curated by Michael Collins, the exhibit included the 22 framed faces from the 2013 museum exhibition and were displayed in the Beach Gallery. Tom's 46 unframed faces, which had never been shown, were unveiled in the Bose Gallery. For the first time since Tom's death, all pieces were for sale, and all proceeds went to the APSU Tom Malone Endowed Art Scholarship, with the exception of 10 of Tom's framed pieces. These works were donated to the Customs House Museum's permanent collection and are entitled the Tom Malone Suite. And finally, Tom Malone Works on Nature was presented in October of 2022 at the Wade Bourne Nature Center Gallery and included 26 paintings and 3 sculptures. The program cover and signature piece, Koi, Oil Pastels, was painted in 1994. Curated by Terry Jordan of Customs House Museum, the works included multimedia paintings of, and I quote from Terry, soft-hued birds, beloved cats, vibrant fields of flowers, and abstracted landscapes. His mentorship under Olin Bryant is evident in this show's fish sculptures with their smooth flowing lines carved into wood and stone, creating a sense of movement. In contrast to the boldness we see in the artist's figurative work, there is a tenderness and the nature-themed paintings Tom created. The pieces in the show are moments in time and homages to the things Tom loved most. Terry Jordan.
Hi everyone. So nice to see so many faces of people that I love and care about here today. I'm here to talk about my mother, Peg Harvill, and her art, and I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to do that. These are just a few of the organizations that my mother contributed her artwork to, her time and her talent. My mother was, she was born in Joelton, Tennessee, to a tobacco farmer. And she and her parents lived in a 3-room cabin for much of her young life on the farm that her grandparents owned, where they farmed tobacco. And so she had a really interesting life and had to be very resourceful in her creations that she made at the time. She told me that she made doll houses and dolls out of paper and flour and water, and the mice would eat them at night, and she had to make them all over again the next day. She was very resourceful. These are just some of my favorite photos of myself with my mother growing up. This is the first painting that I know of that she did when she was 16 years old with some kind of inexpensive paper and paints, and it hung in my grandmother's dining room while I was growing up, and until my grandmother passed away in the late 1990s, when I asked to have it myself. But I think it just shows an enormous amount of talent. She had no training at this time. She graduated from high school early from Joelton High School, and she started at Austin Peay when she was 16. That's when she met my father. And she was a home economics major. She transferred to Peabody and graduated from Peabody with a teaching certificate, and she taught school. She was very creative. She was always sewing or gardening or cooking, but she didn't do any artwork. She always encouraged me with all of my art activities. But when I went off to school in 1976 to SMU, she went back to Austin Peay to take art classes. So she kept, that was 1976, and she kept sketchbooks starting in 1978, which I have, 9 sketchbooks. So I went through those sketchbooks and took photographs of the different pages and wanted to share her work with you that way because I find it really, really interesting. So, sketchbook number 1 is from March 1978 through October 1980. And the first images in there are reference photos of hers, buildings in Clarksville, where you can see she made notes and made little color notes also. On the left is an oil painting that she did in 1978 as a student at Austin Peay. And so you see her reference photo and her painting. And on the right, oils that she did in that was in 1979. And they're large. The 2 top ones are 36 by 31 inches, and the lower one of the irises is 36 by 25 inches. I just think this is fun that she did these watercolor studies. She has a reference photo in the upper left and her color notes, and then on the right you see a watercolor sketch for a painting that I didn't include the final painting because I'm trying to keep this within the time limit. She also did a mural in 1980 that took her 6 weeks from May 1st of 1980 until June 15th, and it's titled Lower Franklin 1908. It's 12 feet wide and 6 feet high, and she did it for, her notes say she did it for Louis Lahif for the Franklin Arcade. So moving along, sketchbook 2, October 1980 to October 1981. October's Gift and Our Town. I love the one on the left that she made all the different color notes that she wanted to use in her final painting. And then on the right you see some of the reference photos she used, a sketch she did, and then her final painting. And on the far right, she's standing with her painting and some other works at one of her early exhibits. So that was 1980. In 1981, you can see the reference photo for Creek from Dunbar Cave that was done in January of 1981. And on the right, you don't see the finished painting, but a sketch, reference photo and sketch for Jungle Brook 2, 1981. In the beginning, let's see, from the far left, was not done in 1981, and it was a gift to the Historical Society and later given to the museum. Then in the center, a reference photo of the courthouse and her painting of that. That's also 1981. And then Madison Street United Methodist Church with her reference photo and the final painting, also 1981. And now we move on to sketchbook 3, October 1981, December 1982. And we have Winter Wash Day on Adams Road. It's a 15 by 22 watercolor in January of 1982. On Sycamore Creek in the center, 15 by 22, that was a donation to Action Auction of Channel 8. It was chosen for the Show of 100 at the Tennessee State Museum and TPAC April 14th, 1982. Then you see on the far right, 2nd Street at Commerce. She titled it The Sketch and her reference photo. So this is an interesting group of paintings, I think. On the far left, you see, well, wait, do you see that? No, I'm not in the right, uh-oh. No? Okay, I've skipped to another. Now I've lost my spot. Well, I know about them. Amaryllis is the one on the far left. And then the one next to it is a study in transparencies, where she did the alphabet and layered in watercolor the alphabet. This third one, she did, she took pieces from the wood shop at Austin P, and she would press it into her paint and then press it into her paper, so she created an abstract design. This was one of her, one of the classes, one of the assignments. And this one here, it's begonias, begonia 2, and oh, I found my spot again, that's good. She took begonia leaves and she dipped them in acrylic paint, and then she pressed that into the paper, let that dry, and then she flowed the watercolor over the leaves to create the color in the leaves. So the white acrylic acted as a resist for the color. And that was on special exhibit in Austin P's executive dining room. So now, this is the one where I messed up my pages. This is, on the left, is the final painting that she titled Alone. And you see her photograph, and then how she cropped the photograph of the duck in the pond. And then she has her sketch, she has her color notes, and then the final painting on the left. The next one, it's similar. It's geese. She cropped in on her subject matter, her reference photo. She did her sketch, and then her final piece. This one is called Opening Night. She grew night blooming cereus flowers, and it was always a big event the night they bloomed. I remember being home a few of those times. She would have friends over and open champagne and celebrate the blooming of the flower. So you see her reference photo on the right here at the top, a sketch she did, and the final painting on the left. So these two pages, on the left you see the sketch that she did, and then the final painting below it. This is Douglas Farm. That was her maiden name, the farm, her parents' farm where she grew up. It's titled Douglas Farm Autumn. And then on the right is City Sentinel. It's a dry point etching. So I think because she was taking classes, she had the chance to experience a lot of different mediums and a lot of different ways to explore her artwork. Next is sketchbook number 4, January '83 through March '84. And the opening page of that, she taped in a photograph of herself working in her garden room, and I've always loved that photograph of her. Then there's Port Royal Bridge on the right with her reference photos and the final painting and some of her color notes. Then we've got on the left the North End Poston Building with her reference and her finished painting, and on the right we have Public Square. 1983, which is a 22 by 30 full sheet watercolor. It has a reference photo, color notes, and quick sketch just for her composition, and then her final painting. So we've got Northern Bank. Northern Bank 1885 to 1955, done in March of 1983 with a photograph of Dotson Gwynn, who was president at the time. Some of you may remember him. And then on the right, we have Lassiter's Livery Stable, and that was in March of 1983. This piece was done for the historic Clarksville book, and the title is Political Fireworks, 1844, depiction of July 1st, 1844 town meeting on Square with Cave Johnson and Gustavus Henry, completed May 20th, 1983, with the Poston Building in the background. And the Poston Building was built in 1843, so when this event took place, the building had only been there 1 year. So this was published, as I said, in Historic Clarksville, and then it was a gift to Governor McWhirter. Passage to New Providence was another in the series for the Historic Clarksville book. She did that in June of 1983, and it depicts the winter of 1863, and she used the Nanny Haskins diary for reference, where Nanny reported that the Union occupation and a guarded covered bridge coming from New Providence. So, and she made a note also on that page. She wanted to include a black Union soldier, and so she researched and made sure that blacks were part of the Union. Black soldiers were part of the Union soldiers. When she did this, she wanted to include that for the diversity for the book. So now on the left, I just included that because I find it fascinating. She was on a trip to Atlanta with my father, and she writes, done from the 25th floor of the Atlanta Hilton, looking at the construction site of the new Marriott Marquis. So that was 1983, if anybody knows either of those hotels, but I just thought it was fascinating that she chose that as subject matter. Oh, did I skip? Let's see. Oh, and then I just really liked the fact that she did a sketch just for her movement and energy of her painting that she was going to do, and then she did a more detailed study on the left in her sketchbook of how the flower actually looked. So we are to sketchbook 5, March 1984, December 1985. On the left is Ringo Mill. It was a gift to the Montgomery County Democratic Women's Fundraiser. And on the right is The Way It Was. It was done for the Leaf Chronicle for their 1984 bicentennial edition of the Leaf Chronicle in June of 1984. On the left, we have Museum Spring Storm. That was for the very first Flying High. She created paintings for Flying High for the first 9 years of the museum. And on the right, you see Lena and Jimmy Organ's cabin that's on their property that she painted for them. And I just think it's interesting, the sketch, the photographs, and the painting all together. On the far left, you have the hotel at Idaho Springs. It was taken at about 1935 because this hotel burned down. It's a hotel that was close to Dunbar Cave. And she created this painting in 1985. And on the right, I think it's really interesting. Again, this was probably a class assignment to do this cabbage painting. And she did others where she painted the same cabbage, she cut it into 4 pieces, and then she rearranged it on her on the mat board. So she did a lot of very creative things due to her studies at Austin Peay. On the far left is Greenhouse Morning. That was her greenhouse. When she started to paint, she stopped cooking, and she stopped sewing, and she stopped gardening in the yard, but she still kept her greenhouse, I think, mostly so she would have subject matter. All she wanted to do was paint once she started. Now that's a large one. It is 40 inches by 30 inches, watercolor. And the one next to it, or in the middle, is Roadside Summer. It's also 40 inches by 30 inches, and that's in 1985. So moving on to sketchbook number 6, March 1986 to March 1988. We have Museum Series Ridge Ornaments. These are also large, 40 inches by 30 inches, 1986. And then Museum Series Roof, 40 inches by 30 inches, 1986. And then she reworked it in 1987. So you see on the far left there are 2 pictures because she reworked her original painting and took a new photograph of it. And then you see on the, that's those 2. Then we have Museum Series Tower Interior, which she's gone really very abstract with her reference photo that she took. And then we have on the right, we have Homecoming 86, which was a commission for the hospital boardroom, her sketches, and her final painting. And that one is 22 by 30, full sheet watercolor. Sketchbook number 7, April 1988 to August 1990. We've got 8th at Maine, And then the one next to it is really interesting. It is 5 little Howards and where they grew. And Kay Howard had commissioned her earlier to do a painting of their home. And then she asked my mother to do one for each of their 5 children. And so my mother took her watercolor paper and she divided it into sections, and she did the drawings 5 times, and then she would do all the skies, and then she would do all the green, and she would do all of the house. I think it's really interesting the way she managed to do 5 commissions for their 5 children. Then Welcome Home is a piece that I have in my home thanks to Leah Foote, because when I first moved back to Clarksville, Leah let me know that there was a woman having an estate sale and had one of my mother's paintings. When I contacted the woman and went to see the piece, and I'd only been in town about 2 weeks, and I looked up in her sketchbook what it was, and the title was Welcome Home. So it was very appropriate. And then on the far right is Pier Party, and I think that's interesting because she took her reference photo at Dunbar Cave, and she did a lot of Dunbar Cave paintings. I could probably do a whole presentation just on her Dunbar Cave paintings. But she cropped in and she included the 2 figures and just a portion of from her reference photo. So moving along, sketchbook number 8, August 1990, November 1992. We've got Party House 1. And let's see, I included that because I love all the sketches of the faces and figures that she did on the left side of her sketchbook. And then there's the final painting on the right. And then the second painting is titled Homes. And I took a separate picture to blow up. It's a spider web that she photographed, did a sketch of, and then I'm quite sure she used masking fluid, a very fine masking fluid, to mask out the lines for the spider web, which I think is very beautiful. Okay, so now we have Flying High on the left, March 1991, and on the right we have Merry Christmas, done in June 1991, a museum Christmas card, and it's in a permanent collection of the museum. Next, on the left-hand side is actually this was the mayor's Christmas card. She wrote in here, "This drove me batty. I worked on this half sheet almost 2 weeks. All these teeny tiny people." So you can see from her reference photo, she had no people in the scene, so she created all the people in the scene for this piece. Now we have the Dixon Building on the left. There was a commission from Suzanne Uffelman. And we have the mansion, which most of you know as Love Lights a Tree. That was done for the American Cancer Society in 1992. So she has all the little figures here, and she used, let's see, that one was 14 1/4 by 21 3/4. No, I'm sorry, that's it. But the drawings that you see, she did those on tissue paper, and then she used pencil on the back so she could lay it on her watercolor paper and trace it down. So she would have her figures that she used for that painting. Okay. It's hard to see all the way down to the end of this. So the far left is Balcony on 2nd. You can see from her reference photo that she just chose a very small section to do that vignette of the balcony. I thought that was interesting. And then a very involved piece, Perkins and Miller, around 1922, the building around 1922. This is a full sheet watercolor that she did in October of 1992, and it was a commission for Frank Miller. Christmas on Spring Street, she did in 1992. It was a mayor's Christmas card, and it's of the building maintenance, building and codes. And now the last sketchbook, which was labeled November 1992 until Ringo Mill is on the left from the 1940s. It's a half-sheet watercolor, 15 by 22, and her comment is that underneath all those figures need to use all these. So she did all the people, and then she included all of them in the painting. On the right, we have Flying High, 10th anniversary. So you can see on the left side of that sketchbook, she has in front of her the 9 other pictures of the 9 other flying highs that she had done, and her sketch for that year's piece, which was in a recent exhibition here at the museum. We have River Run on the left, which was a Riverfest poster submission. I thought it was very interesting that she would do these very realistic representational works, and then she would do something more abstracted. On the right, we have the Lillian, the sketch for the painting The Lillian. It was for a Roxy Gala. In 1995, she created the watercolor image for the poster for the Southern Festival of Books. And interestingly enough, my first children's book had come out that year, and I was there presenting for August House Publishers from Little Rock, and she had the poster that year. So we were published together there. So these are just a group that I really like. Waiting is of the train station. I just think it's a lovely design. It's a full sheet watercolor. And I wanted to include the one next to it, which is the Mabry Manice house. And she wrote a comment in there which said, "I really enjoyed getting to know Susan while working on this." The next one is the cave pool. It was a commission by Ann Clark for Jerry Clark. And I think it's amazing all the teeny tiny people that she fit into that. So. And then there's the Miller house, the Dunlop Miller house that she did when it was the Red Cross. And I think it's very poignant that she did a painting of that house that we're about to lose. And these were the last 4. Last 4 is a major project that she did in 1997. The Browning Building, Harnett Hall, the Little Red Barn, and Emerald Hill that she did for Austin Peay. And prints were made and given to donors at certain levels. She did 2 more paintings in 1997. Her mother died that year, and Alzheimer's was already starting to take over, and then she had breast cancer the following year, and she didn't paint again. But she's left us a wonderful body of work and contributions to this community, and certainly a huge contribution to my own life. So, thank you.
So nice. I've got a painting from each of the presentations. I'm so proud that I've got that. I'm going to kind of take a little different approach. It's going to kind of be a hash of a presentation, I'm afraid. But I kind of thought I'd talk about Tommy and Iris Mabry, but I thought I'd kind of maybe go into a little bit about how their art came about in terms of our family. And so the very first, our family writings in Montgomery County got off to a kind of an inauspicious start when Anna Morast Mabry, who had married John Mabry after the death of Melinda, his wife, her first cousin, Tamesia Walker Cornell, wrote a book called Minor Place, about 1869, the first woman novelist in Montgomery County. She was married to Hamilton Cornell, John Mabry's brother-in-law. And I found a review of it. Our friends and brothers, Paul, Tavel, and Hannah, have obliged us with a copy of a little novel called Minor Place by Anna Fredere, which is a pen name named after Anna Morast and her sister Elfreda. We do not know the authoress, nor do we think her fame is founded on this work. A story somewhat complex and hard to follow, with no particular point or aim, it appeals to our sympathies as a production of the South and then makes us regret the time lost in its perusal. We hope some young ladies will buy copies enough to pay the writer who may be poor and need the help. Certainly we find no harm in it and may be entertained for ourselves. Our literary stomach craves stronger meat. So Minor Place was consigned to the dustbin of history, so to speak. So John Mabry, we have his writings from his books from the 1830s, 40s, and this is a Louisa May Alcott poem that he wrote, and I assume he did it for practice. I know my father had to remember memorized Gunga Din when he was at Webb School, so maybe this was the case. He also, in his book, we have a longhand version of a rendering of the Legend of Pocahontas. Education was very important. I think the group that came to in Clarksville in the 1820s, the Dabneys, the Meriwethers, the Elliots, Sturdivants, Mansons, those family, they came from Virginia around Richmond area. Many of them, for example, the Meriwethers had been at Jamestown. They'd been in Virginia a long time. When they moved here, they were all very educated people and probably a little bit different than the very first settlers that came to Montgomery County. They had schools on their farms. The Mabrys had a school on their farm. The Fergusons had one. The Meriwethers had one. We have letters from a Miss Mary Pretlow, who was a teacher on the farm when she was from Staunton, Virginia. She writes from New York and then from Norfolk, where she founded the public library in Norfolk, Virginia, and the main library is named after her. So these teachers, as a matter of fact, Nanny Haskins' daughter, Fanny, was a teacher at the school on our farm. So these kids were very well educated. This was Poplar Hill, where they lived at Fort Campbell. There were 12 children. When John Mabry shot himself in the head in despair in 1868, after the death of his wife and the failure of his farms. The economics of slavery were no longer there, and he was despondent. His young wife, Anna Morast, sold all her properties in Tuscaloosa and Mobile and redeemed the family farm and raised his children as they were her own and in the house. Thomas Lawson Mabry, which was my great-grandfather, and Susan and my great-grandfather, this is a painting of him, married Betty Dabney, Elizabeth Dabney Mabry, which is my daughter's name, and Susan's cousin and sister. We have a lot. There was one writer who did a thesis on Tommy and said this family is very hard to do research on because they use the same names over and over. And so this was Tom when he was younger, and he was older. He married Betty Dabney. They had 12 children. The very oldest very first one was here's a picture of never seen one of these before, have you? This is Uncle John and his report cards from Stewart College. He was not a very good student. I think barely tolerable as most of his grades are there. But Anna Morast, we tend to think of these people as one-dimensional people. Anna Mabry, we know as Stockade Annie, but she was also a novelist. This was her first book. This was her second. She was educated at Clarksville Female Academy, and then Anna Morast sent her to Tuscaloosa Female College, where she grew up there. All these kids were educated at Stewart College, Southwestern, University of Virginia. So there's a lot of education in the family, and writing was kind of considered a thing that was done, and that's continued on into my day. Writing, art was always very important. One of the most interesting cousins. This is a picture of Anna Morast, Stockade Annie. This was her wedding with her mother in black in mourning after her husband had died. Uncle Morast and his wife Ada, and Dr. Barr. Anna Stockade Annie's husband was John Christie Barr. There's a John Christie Barr Distinguished Chair of History at Tulane University to this day. He was a brilliant PhD. They lived in New Orleans for a number of years. They moved up here. Most of us in Clarksville just think she's the crazy old lady that wore black dresses down to her toes and a sash. Another interesting member of the family was Lacey Lockhart. Lacey was Nanny Smith's son, the grandson of Lucy Dabney Smith of the Smith Trainer Mansion, which was my great-grandmother's aunt. And Lacey Lockhart went to Princeton. He translated Italian plays, Dante's Inferno, and there's a Center for Poetry and Translation at Princeton University to this day, named after him. He also worked for the Nashville Banner, and in addition to translating plays, if you liked college football in the 1930s, there were three rating agencies: AP, UPI, and DLL for Dr. Lacey Lockhart. Very eccentric guy. Of course, another member of the family that was very And these families had the schools. I told you about the teachers at the Mabry School. Well, at the Meriwether School, one of the teachers was Morris Gordon, who married one of the daughters, and their daughter was Caroline Gordon. And so she was a cousin and part of the family writing tradition. This is Alec Morris, sportsman. She was one of the finest novelists ever, and she helped Tommy Mabry write his stories, and was very close with Tom. This is Dr. Barr with the man from Spain at their wedding. That's my Aunt Lucy, if anybody remembers her, Lucy White, who lived on Forbes Avenue. Some of you probably knew her. This is up top row. There are four that I know that's merit badly. That's William Morast Mabry. Doesn't he look like my father? Uncle Morast. That's Tom. That's Thomas Dabney Mabry. That's Susan's grandfather. And then the next one is Uncle Morast. And then Elijah Cunningham would have been Tom Cunningham, one of Tom Cunningham's grandfather. The Mabry Tobacco Company that Susan's grandfather ran, the scene of Another Season, if you've read those stories, was on Commerce Street. We knew it as Ogle Salvage Mart. This is Tommy as a young man. The photo on the right was taken by Carl Van Beckton. This is of his resume, right? And tells you about it. He's known for writing, and of course his stories were four of his stories were published in the White Hand. They're wonderful stories. If you get a chance, we can figure out a way to get you prints of them. I think I have PDFs of them all. But he went to Harvard, went to Europe for several years, and he worked in a gallery in New York, came back, worked, I think, at the family tobacco business for a while and didn't really suit him, and went to Vanderbilt to get a master's degree, where he became kind of ensconced with the fugitives, one of which was Alan Tate, who was Caroline Gordon's husband. And he became very fond of James Weldon Johnson and the lecturers at Fisk. He had a party for Langston Hughes and invited the faculty from the Vanderbilt, the fugitives, and it was quite a disaster. They did not. Alan Tate wrote him a scathing letter. They did not appreciate being invited on a social basis with black men. Eventually, Tommy resigned his fellowship at Vanderbilt and went to teach at Fisk. He then went to New York, became his first executive director of the Museum of Modern Art. Among his first exhibits that he worked on were African art, William Edmondson, and then Walker Evans, who was his best friend. His short stories are wonderful. He later wrote these stories, I think, in the 50s, I believe is correct. He was working for Time Life magazine. Do any of y'all remember the Time Life film strips when you were in school? Did any of you see them? Tom developed those for Time Life magazine. He then went to work at the University of Iowa, taught in Iowa's Writers' Workshop, and moved back here in the 1960s. These are the letters. These are I can't really. What am I looking at?
These letters to Dr. Mims.
Oh yeah, these are the letters of Dr. Mims, where Tom wrote after they had castigated him for standing up for the black scholars at Fisk. Very, very famous letter. This is the letter that Dr. Mims wrote him back. It's all a pretty sad episode in Vanderbilt's history, and I'm sure something they would prefer to forget. I also talk about Iris. The archives had a little blurb on Iris the other day. Iris was Tom's younger sister by 14 years, Susan. And they were both valedictorians of their classes at Clarksville High School. She went to Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, was a modern dancer, majored in philosophy, not in dance. Was fairly successful. She lived in had a farm in the Berkshires. When I was a kid, she was on Look magazine. She taught several places. She had a Guggenheim Fellowship to Paris and was the first modern dancer to appear in Paris after World War II. She's quite the character. We have all these letters, and I have one where Martha Graham, she talks about how Martha Graham tried to keep her from getting a Guggenheim Fellowship, and she describes Martha Graham as a drunken, bitter, vitriolic old bitch who's well past her prime, and it's her right. But anyway, so this is a biography that was done for Iris by a friend of hers. When she died, there was no service. Here, I think the family scattered her ashes on the family plot at Greenwood Cemetery. And I guess, and after that, of course, one of Nellie Runyon, Nellie Mabry, the other daughter, her daughter, Elizabeth Dabney Mabry Wise, another Elizabeth Dabney Mabry, and I know it drives people crazy, is a very good, very talented painter, had an exhibition at the Parthenon. Her daughter is a writer and illustrator of children's books. My niece Emily teaches English at Western Carolina University. My daughter majored in English, as did I. Of course, got a business degree as well. And so I guess what I would say about all this family, and it's probably similar with other artistic families, certainly you see it with Charlsie and Johnny, and Charlsie's mother was a painter as well, or aunt, your aunt was a painter as well, and then Peg and Kitty, is that these artistic genes have to be nurtured, and they kind of run their family. And in our family, we were always kind of taught that art was something you did. You should play a musical instrument, you should read, you should write. My daughter plays, we forced her to play piano and violin, my son piano and guitar, and they still do, and it was just part of the life. And so it was something, having a trade was important, but not as important as art and literature. And I think that was, as I've kind of going through all the hundreds of letters and things that we have, I've kind of learned that is not just something that springs out of thin air, that's something that has to be nurtured and encouraged. So anyway, I think that's all I've got. How'd I do on time, Linda?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks a lot.